If you are struggling with chronic pain at the moment or a chronic health issue and you found that the conventional approaches have not been working, there may be a missing piece to this puzzle. Now, there's a nerve in your body that covers a lot of areas and does a lot of different things. This nerve I'm about to talk about covers your heart rate, your digestion, your mood, inflammation, even memory and speech. And it does a lot of different things. So it's a very, very important nerve. The nerve I'm talking about is called the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve translates loosely as the wandering nerve. The reason why it's called the wandering nerve is because it covers the ear, the throat, the heart, the digestive system, and even your nervous system too. So it does a lot of different things, whereas most nerves only really have one responsibility or one function. So in this video, I'm going to touch on what the vagus nerve is, what the anatomy of the nerve is and where it goes. We're going to look at some of the physiological processes that it's involved in. And then from there, we're going to touch on how this can relate to you and your health issues. So the first thing we want to touch on is the anatomy. The vagus nerve starts up in the brain, comes out of the brainstem from the medulla. It branches into the ear. So it is responsible for the sensory part of the ear, of the tragus. So that's this bit here, the ear canal and even the auricle. From there, the vagus nerve comes down through the carotid sheath. So it innervates the pharynx and the larynx. So it's probably helpful in speech and swallowing. It innervates the esophagus. So the tube that your food goes down. It goes into the thorax. It covers the heart. So it's responsible for your heart rate and even your blood pressure. Then it goes down into the digestive system and the abdomen. It innervates a lot of different organs within this region. Your stomach, your large intestine, your small intestine, even things like your pancreas, gallbladder. So there's definitely a part that it plays in your digestion. Not only that, but it helps with things like inflammation. So as you can tell, it covers a lot of things. I'm not going to go into much more anatomy. I could go more, but I think for now that's probably enough. Before I go into the functions, I just want to highlight that when I talk about the vagus nerve, it's not just one nerve. So it's not just one-sided. It comes down both sides of the neck and then branches down. Now in the nervous system, there's two types. We have the somatic and we have the autonomic. The somatic is the nervous system that you can control. So it controls your movement, your sensation, your sensory part of the nervous system. So that's your somatic nervous system. The other side is the autonomic nervous system. Now this is the stuff that you can't control. That's probably a good thing, because if we were in control of our own digestion or our own heart rate, we'd probably end up messing ourselves up. So your body is responsible for that. Things like your heart rate, your digestion, your vasoconstriction or dilation, so your blood vessels enlarging, contracting, so temperature regulation, that kind of stuff. So within your autonomic nervous system, that branches into two parts. You have the fight and flight and the rest and digest. The fight and flight is known as the sympathetic nervous system, and the rest and digest is known as the parasympathetic. So the vagus nerve plays a role in the parasympathetic nervous system. So that helps you to do your resting and digesting. So when you have a vagus nerve, let's say, that is functioning, it's firing, then that is promoting, so that is stimulating rest and digest and all of the functions associated with that. When you have the vagus nerve that doesn't have so much input, then the fight and flight can take over. So if you understand that, then you get a really good idea of what we're talking about in the rest of this video. So what about the functions of the vagus nerve? So as I've already mentioned, it has a lot of different roles. We have things like the heart rate regulation. So if the vagus nerve wasn't there, your heart rate would naturally start to increase. So with the vagus nerve playing a role, it maintains your heart rate at around 60 to 80 beats per minute at rest. If you were to cut that vagus nerve and you were at rest, your heart rate would naturally rise to probably around 100 beats per minute. Now, of course, as you're running around, as you're doing activity, your heart rate can go higher than that. But that's because the sympathetic nervous system takes over. So it has a role in your heart rate. And of course, blood pressure comes with that as well, because as you increase your heart rate, your blood pressure can increase. As you increase your heart contraction, your blood pressure increases. So moving on, then it has a role in your digestive function. So if your vagus nerve is firing, that will help with the digestion. So it increases your digestive ability. It increases your motility around through the digestive system. So it increases the speed at which the digested food travels through. It also helps with things like stomach acid production or enzyme production. So not just involved in the muscular contraction and the movement, but also the chemicals that break your food down as well. It's involved in respiration and the muscles that control your breathing. And an interesting one is it can be involved in your immune system. Now, your immune system, a lot of it is produced within your digestive system, within your gut. Not only that, but it helps, the vagus nerve can help reduce inflammation. And I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. But if your vagus nerve is firing, then it may potentially help reduce inflammation within the body. The vagus nerve is also involved in your mood, your mental health, cognitive function. A lot of that is partly to do with the connection between the vagus nerve and the brain, but also in terms of neurotransmitter release, things like serotonin as well. Other things that the vagus nerve can be involved in are glucose regulation, sleep, and even people who have neurological issues like seizures, epilepsy, potentially even Alzheimer's. A lot of this stuff is still under research, but it's been shown to have effects within these fields. So there's a brief overview of what the vagus nerve is involved in. Now let's go a little bit deeper and look into chronic pain, because I think for you, if you're here, you're probably here because of some sort of chronic pain. And I'm going to list these out first of all, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail for some of these. So it has anti-inflammatory effects. It has neurotransmitter regulation. There's a gate control theory. There's some evidence to suggest it's involved in neuroplasticity. So that's the way that your nerves change within your brain. There's a relationship between the vagus nerve and stress as well, and stress hormone production. And lastly, the vagus nerve has a role in neurotransmitters. So let's touch on some of them briefly. I'm not going to touch on all of them, but just some of them. So first of all, let's go with the anti-inflammatory effects. When the vagus nerve is working correctly, when it's firing, it helps to suppress inflammation. So it produces anti-inflammatory chemicals such as acetylcholine, and helps to reduce the production of things like inflammatory cytokines, which are chemicals that essentially lead to pain and inflammation and swelling. Then we have something called the gate control theory. Now, when you feel pain, those pain signals go into your spine and up into your brain, and then you perceive pain. If you can interrupt those signals, then you won't be feeling pain. So when you're feeling pain, if you get the vagus nerve working more efficiently or firing, then that can interrupt those signals of pain going up to the brain. So potentially you can minimize how you feel pain. So clinically, this could have beneficial effects for people with chronic pain or something like rheumatoid arthritis or fibromyalgia and other chronic pain conditions. I think when it comes to pain, the vagus nerve needs a bit more study. A lot of the research done with the vagus nerve has shown really beneficial effects when it comes to the gut neurological things. And I think the chronic pain side has not been fully researched just quite yet. So we're still in early days, but this is promising. And lastly, when it comes to things like stress, with the vagus nerve being a parasympathetic nerve, if that takes over, it helps with your rest and digest. With that, it helps to reduce the stress response, things like the stress hormone production of cortisol. So with the reduction in cortisol comes a reduction in inflammation. And also with stress comes a reduction in tolerance to pain. So if we can allow our bodies to kind of chill out a little bit more, then that helps with your body's ability to tolerate pain. And as I'm sure you know, if you're in chronic pain, sometimes your tolerance to things is decreased. You find yourself overreacting to things that ordinarily would have not affected you at all. So now we've briefly touched on pain. A few other areas that are quite promising our mental health and cognitive function. There's been quite a lot of research to show that the vagus nerve has an important role to play with people with epilepsy, seizures, migraines, cluster headaches. So if you are experiencing any of those kind of things, potentially your vagus nerve might have been affected. Maybe there's some hope for you to overcome those. And if you have those, again, your tolerance to chronic pain is going to be decreased as well. So if you've got neurological conditions and chronic pain, then, you know, if you improve one, you're probably going to improve the other. So it's involved with things like learning, memory, stress and mood, because the vagus nerve helps to produce neurotransmitters, things like serotonin. So there's a potential here for a lot of therapeutic intervention when it comes to neurological or mental health. Beyond the mental health side of things, the vagus nerve is also responsible for things like glucose regulation, sleep, and even seizure control in epileptics. So that's a really brief overview of the vagus nerve. What I want you to get from this is, if you have a chronic issue that isn't getting better, maybe there is some other reason. Now, it might not be anything to do with the vagus nerve, but sometimes it's worth thinking outside the box. And I wanted to bring something to you that was a bit outside the box that might just get you thinking. If you have an injury, a chronic injury, then the chances are a lot of your recovery is going to be based on what you do. And as you know, most of the stuff that I show you is related to physical pain. So strengthening, stretching, regular movement, better nutrition is all going to help. But sometimes you just need a bit of an extra boost, especially if there's other things going on. Quite often, a lot of the patients I see don't just have physical symptoms, they have other things going on as well, other health issues. A lot of people have mental health conditions these days, like depression, anxiety. So potentially, if we can come up with other solutions that are going to help with these things, then it's an area worth exploring. Now, I'm not saying that treating the vagus nerve in any way is going to overcome a lot of your conditions, your problems, but it's certainly something that could potentially be easy to work on, and that's something that I can maybe show you in another video. But it's something worth considering. You know, if it's easy enough to change, then it's worth exploring. Now, how does the vagus nerve and chronic pain relate to you? Well, anatomically, think about this. If the vagus nerve is coming through your neck, if you've had, let's say, a traumatic head injury, or you've had something like a whiplash, or you've got arthritis within your neck, some of those physical impacts, traumas, changes within the bones may have a compressive effect on the vagus nerve. So if we have something compressing the vagus nerve, let's say you've got arthritis, let's say you've got a natural bony change within your spine that's compressing the vagus nerve, potentially you are decreasing the function of that nerve. As you decrease that function of the nerve, the parasympathetic side of things is not going to be as effective, which will allow the sympathetic side to be more unregulated. So things like your heart rate would go up, your tolerance to pain would go up, your inflammation may go up. So if we can work on the physical, if we can work on, let's say, the changes within the neck or reduced compression within the nerve, then potentially that can help with chronic pain, chronic health issues, heart issues. So hopefully today's video has given you something to think about. Hopefully it's given you a reason to think outside the box. In another video, I will talk more about stimulating vagus nerve and how you can maybe do this sort of thing at home. But for now, hopefully you've got an idea what the vagus nerve is, what it does, and how it might be affecting you and your chronic pain or your chronic health issues.